My name, my name is Aubrey Hiscox. I don't know if that came through, but I want to make sure I repeat myself again, everyone. Hello and good afternoon. My name is Aubrey Hiscox. I am a member of Eastern ACE's webinar subcommittee. I'm very excited to introduce today's webinar presenters. Kristen Eichholz, who is the Executive Director of Career Development at DeSales University. Teresa Fuel, who is the Career and Internship Advisor at St. John's University, and Joe Santa Cruz, who is the Assistant Director of Career Services at Salem State University. You will hear from these three Eastern ACE annual conference programming co-chairs who will share with you their experience as proposal reviewers and what it takes to have your conference proposal accepted. From your program title to your program description and target audience, to your learning objectives and connection to conference themes, this webinar will leave you feeling confident to submit a conference proposal that will be accepted. Before they get started with their presentation, there are a few important things to note. During the presentation, there will be a question and answer box accessible to you, where you can submit questions that come up for you during the presentation. I will receive your questions and hold them until the end of the hour. Please also feel free to utilize the chat box to engage with each other and our speakers. A copy of these slides will be available to you to download on the Eastern ACE website after this presentation. A recorded version of this webinar will also be available 1 week from today in the webinar archive on the Eastern ACE website. Now, without further ado, I'm happy to turn it over to Kristen, Teresa, and Joe for their presentation. Looking forward to hear what you have to share.
Thank you so much, Aubrey. And hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. On behalf of Kristen, Teresa, and myself, we want to say welcome and thank you for joining us this afternoon to talk about this exciting topic. Today's agenda is going to focus on a few different things. First, we're going to just go over kind of getting started, meaning, maybe you have this idea. Should I even, move forward with it? And then we'll get into things like what actually makes a good presentation topic, right? If I am going to submit something, what should my topic potentially be? What should I consider as I'm writing this proposal? And then, of course, we're going to give you some of our feedback as reviewers. What are we looking for when we're reviewing these proposals? And then finally, we're going to end with some SHRM information, some SHRM credits, specific more to the Eastern ACE Conference. So that's our agenda. And like I said, getting started. So the beginning stuff of all this stuff, the question that typically will come up at the very beginning, should I even present at a conference? Our answer to you is going to be yes. Yes, we encourage you to do this, to step out of your comfort zone and to really think about what information you can be sharing. But as you begin to consider this, what should you be thinking about? Well, number one, your confidence is really going to be important in all this stuff. You have to make sure you believe that not everybody knows the information. And like we say, step out of your comfort zone and challenge yourself, within this particular initiative. And then ask yourself some questions. Is there something that you're proud of? A topic perhaps that you're passionate about and that you want to share and you think could really benefit other members of the organization. Let's say you've already submitted a proposal before and you've presented. We say don't hesitate to resubmit, especially if there's a part two. I think follow-up type of presentations really can go a long way. And I think that audience members appreciate that to understand that follow-up, to get more additional information. And remember too, anybody can submit a proposal. Regardless of where you are in your career, what status you are, so from grad assistants to faculty members, to counselors, all the way up to VPs and directors. And then of course, our friends on the recruiting and HR side of it too. We encourage you to submit information. I think particularly like we say, if it's beneficial to everybody, we want to hear it. And the other part of the getting started is thinking about, okay, now that I've made that determination, yes, I do want to present. What we would suggest to you as co-chairs of the programming committee, become familiar with what the organization is looking for when you submit, right? And so as an example, Kristen, if you can click on that link, Eastern ACE does a great job of outlining everything within the call for proposals, things that you should be considering, tips for you to increase your chances, different types of session topics, as well as other information that is really important before you actually go ahead and click submit. So that would be our suggestion for you, is to really take a look at this, whether it's Eastern ACE or another organization, really become familiar with what it is they're looking for, utilize those guidelines to help give yourself the best chance at getting your proposal accepted. We mentioned a couple things of kind of what it includes, but again, read what the websites are saying, what the organizations are actually going to be looking for. So what makes a good presentation topic? Well, there's a number of factors that go into this. One, the most obvious is going to be the content. And ask yourself, is this content relevant to the organization I'm submitting this for, and relevant to the industry, within the moment? What Eastern ACE does is we categorize different topics that you can submit your proposals under, so making sure that it fits into one of those areas. And then two, the audience, right? Who are we actually presenting this to? Does your topic speak to a wide constituent base? That becomes important on our end too, to make sure that there's enough there to say, yes, this is going to be beneficial to all members of our organization. Other things to consider too, though, would be how you actually deliver the presentation. So the most typical or traditional way is going to be that lecture. But if you think about other things like discussion, perhaps a panel, or even going over a case study, that may also increase your chances of getting this chosen as a potential presentation, just given the fact that there's some variety there. And in other ways that we can potentially engage the audience, as well as engaging other folks, within that conversation. Keep in mind, you are within a time constraint. Usually it is going to be 1 hour. So if you think about the content that you want to share, you give yourself an entire hour. Don't forget, you have to build in some time for Q&A as well. So be mindful of that as you put together all the information and say, what is the most important things that I do want to share? So we do keep within that 1 hour time frame. And lastly, we want to recommend that you're not too niche, right? We want to make sure, again, this is open and viable for all of our constituents. So ask yourself that question: how feasible could this be for others to implement? And the example that we provide is, perhaps you've worked on a project, but if it requires a substantial budget, that may take away the opportunity for some other folks to be able to do that. So be mindful of all that stuff as you begin to think about, A, do I want to submit? And then two, what could that potential topic be? I'm now going to turn it over to Kristen, who's going to go into more detail about how to write the proposal.
Thank you, Joe. So when you're sitting down to write the proposal, just like anything that when we're writing something for the first time, brainstorming is so important, and getting those ideas and those thoughts out. And going back to Joe's point earlier of having that confidence that what you have to say and what you want to talk about is relevant and it's of value. You want to make sure that you're defining the topic you're addressing clearly and concisely. Remember when we talk to our students or peers or others about resumes, and when you're dealing with a stack of resumes, what is it that stands out? What catches the employer's eyes to want to read more? And by keeping it concise and to the point, it's going to help us in speaking about proposals and reviewing on task and being drawn to certain areas. Make sure that you're putting the time into a catchy title, something that is going to grab the reader's attention. Create and play on the conference theme. So the example we have here was from 2 years ago when the conference theme was Be More in Baltimore. And there was a proposal topic called Be More, Reach More Students, Career Integration Project. Now, I say this and I don't want you to stress about coming up with the most creative, but if you can put a spin or a play on words, I would encourage you to do so. Captivate readers with your description, and there are ways that you can do that. Providing interesting and/or diverse perspectives on your topic, explaining what your presentation will cover in regard to the topic presented, and writing solid learning objectives. I think anytime we've gone to a conference before and we're reading through the proposal or through the programs, we're looking at what are my takeaways? What's the ROI? What am I going to get from this? And we always hope that those takeaways are ones that we can implement. So as you look at and you start to write that proposal and you start working on that brainstorm, flush out those objectives in a way that they're concrete and people can walk away with resources of some sort. So the example there of an objective could be participants will gain insight into how technology can be leveraged to provide unique, scalable solutions to reach a large amount of students. Some additional tips for you, a little more specific to Eastern ACE, is making sure the scope of your presentation matches the time allowed. And Joe spoke about this, that with Eastern ACE proposals, they're typically 1 hour. So as you're writing and brainstorming, you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I could talk about this for days. You know, maybe you need to think about how to scale it back to 60 minutes. Or as you're flushing it out more, you think, I don't think I can fill an hour. What other options do I have? Prior to us doing the virtual Eastern ACE conference, if you are a regular or attended Eastern ACE in person before, we've done 20-minute speed learning sessions. And that's another great opportunity when we're in person to submit a proposal of a topic of interest that maybe won't take the full 60 minutes to present on. So after you have those ideas down, you brainstormed, you are trying to flush out, go back to the call for proposals and see what the word limit is, because you want to make sure that you're fitting within that word limit and that you're submitting everything in that concise format. Provide additional information required. So just as we tell our students to cross all their T's and dot all their I's when they're applying for jobs, you want to do the same for the call for proposal. What are the line items that are asterisks that you need to fill out? Are there sections on AV equipment, contact information, other presenters that will be presenting with you? Because you can have co-presenters, you can have other people that do present with you. So making sure their information is submitted as well. And then, of course, meeting the deadline for submission. I want to spend some time now speaking with you about the review process and how it's being looked at. And I've had the absolute honor and pleasure for the past 3 years of serving on the committee, and in the last 2 years working with Joe and Sharisa on this process. And we can tell you it's never easy because there are so many outstanding proposals that come through. And having been a part of this for a while, I want to share with you some of those things that make it pop, that make it stand out, that we are able to move forward with those for the conference. When you're writing, write toward your audience, and knowing your audience is twofold. Your primary audience is getting your foot through the door with the reviewers, that the conference proposal is one that meets the word allotment, that it has thorough objectives, that it has a catchy title, that it's a diverse topic that fits one of the categories we're looking for. The secondary audience is your conference attendees. So what will this, or what population of attendees will this topic speak toward? So specific to Eastern ACE, proposals are evaluated by the annual conference programming committee. So it is myself, Joe, and Sharisa the past 2 years, but we also have a team that reviews. So you're having multiple sets of eyes on your documents. Several key factors that come into play. Does the proposal contribute to an overall balanced assortment of topics? Is the focus of the proposal presentation clear and well-defined and specific to Eastern ACE members? And when we say Eastern ACE members, it is our colleges and our employers. When we look at it, we think, is this topic not only good for individual groups, but both as a whole? Does the proposal provide educational benefit? And the proposal is non-commercial nor self-promoting. So if you are an employer or someone that has your own product or your own book, it's okay to reference it in your presentation, but the presentation should not be of the sole purpose to promote or being entrepreneur in that presentation. I do want to share that all members of the programming committee partake in implicit bias training. So that's organized by our diversity and inclusion committee in Eastern ACE to ensure that every proposal is being reviewed equitably and fair. And a part of that is we are using the NACE conference guidelines to guide us through this process. So when we look at the NACE guidelines, we're looking at it in the sense of learning techniques, practical application, quality, speaker expertise, diversity, thought, and innovation. And then there's a scoring of 1 to 5. And that's how we review a presentation proposal as it comes in. As we review it, we're using these guidelines to score it on 1 to 5. We then use a combined score of everyone reviewing that proposal to come up with a average. And at the end, we're looking at average scores on that scale of 1 to 5, along with the diversity of topics, because we don't want to have a whole conference of just one topics. We need to make sure that there's that diversity as well as what the score ranking is coming out to be. So what I'd like to do now with that is have you digest it, but also move it forward to my dear colleague, Teresa, to talk to you about the SHRM credits and your proposal.
Thank you, Kristen. So just FYI, there's thundering behind me. So if you hear that noise, I apologize. So I want to talk to you about getting your proposal approved for SHRM credits. So SHRM stands for the Society of Human Resource Management and is the professional organization for HR professionals. This SHRM, or this organization, I like to think of it as its thought leader. It provides its members with information ranging from anything on recruiting, training, technology, resolving employment legal issues, sexual harassment, misconduct, best practices, new trends, and more. They're the ones that set the trends of what's going on in the workforce. Anyone can be a member of SHRM. So anyone that's in the HR function, so your recruiters, your talent acquisition, your HR operations, as well as people from the from higher ed side and the career services side. So your ER professionals as well as your career advisors. This is where we all come together and kind of just figure out, like, does your proposal hit those trends, right? Making sure that everything is kind of like on the mark. Eastern ACE is a SHRM provider in which its members are pursuing the SHRM CP or the SCP, and I'm going to drop it in the chat right there. If you are a member and you want to get your certification in SHRM, the CP and the SCP, all the information is right there. We, as Eastern ACE provider, as a SHRM provider, we give 1 credit for 1 hour for content development. So any proposals of the webinars and or conference has to be 1 hour in order for you to get that the certification, or the credit rather. Can you go to the next slide for me? Thank you. So how do you get your SHRM credit and to get your credits and your proposal approved for SHRM? So one, you must meet one of the SHRM BOK requirements, and I'm going to drop the SHRM BOK requirements, the link in the chat. So the Continuing Education Committee will receive all the proposals, and we will review all the content to make sure that it is meeting one of the criteria, the criteria within the SHRM BOK. You want to make sure that whatever you are presenting, and if you want to make sure your webinar is meeting, your conference session is meeting the SHRM credits, you want to make sure that you are really hitting the targets within the SHRM BOK. So I would tell you to definitely read them to make sure you're hitting the targets. The most SHRM BOK, the SHRM BOK competencies or knowledge domains that has been approved, I'm sorry, I just have to move this for a second because I can't see, has been the knowledge domain, knowledge domain, diversity and inclusions, ethical practice, relationship management, global and cultural effectiveness, business acumen, and critical evaluations. Those were pretty much the most popular ones. However, you can cover any of the competencies as well as the knowledge domains. Your session, going back to what Joe mentioned earlier, about your session being at least an hour. So your hour can be broken up to 45 to 50 minutes in kind of your presentation, leaving 15 to 10 minutes with Q&A at the end. Something that Kristen also mentioned that's really, really important for the continuing education to review your session is to make sure that those learning objectives, we really take a look at those learning objectives, and those learning objectives, as well as kind of the overview, really tell the story into your session. We're not going to have your PowerPoint at that time, and I wish we did, but we don't. So we rely heavily on those objective statements as well as the summary. We have seen some, like in the past, some summaries that is kind of like a sentence long. Again, the more details, the better. Sometimes we are left in a situation where we can't really tell if it really meets the SHRM credentials. So you just want to make sure that when you're writing those objective statements that you're being as detailed as possible. And when we read it, or the continuing education team reads it, that they're reading those objectives and can understand like what are those key takeaways, and making sure that those key takeaways are hitting kind of like those competencies and or knowledge domains. We're also part of HRCI. Now, how HRCI works, we only submit the conference, which means the Continuing Education Committee takes all the proposals that will be presented at the conference, and we put it into an Excel spreadsheet, and the HRCI reviews them. So in terms of what's required or what they look for, I couldn't tell you because they do that on their side and they just let us know that has been approved. Luckily, we have been approved for the last couple of years, and I hope we continue that. So when you're thinking about, again, just writing your proposal, just want to make sure if it hits the SHRM, if you want it to become SHRM approved, definitely click on that last link that I just dropped in the chat with the SHRM bot. That will just tell you kind of what are those competencies that you want to make sure that you're hitting to make sure that you can receive the credit for the session and the conference.
All right, well, let's move into some final thoughts, and we want to also share with you some of our own experiences as not only reviewers, but submitters of proposals ourselves before we got onto the committee. First and foremost, going back to Joe's point to start us off, don't assume people already know the information. Submit. It doesn't hurt. It's so much of what we're saying is reflective of what we already know or what we share with our students. What's the worst that can happen? You submit again at another point, or you submit for another conference, but don't deny yourself the opportunity to put it forth. So going off of, if your proposal is not accepted, ask questions as to why it wasn't accepted. Refine, look at others, resubmit. We've had folks reach out to us and ask why their proposals weren't accepted, and we have let them know. Maybe it was the objectives weren't clear enough, or maybe it was we had 20 diversity, equity, inclusion presentations. We couldn't accept all 20. It was a really tough decision. It came down to, think about it, comes down to 2 candidates, and you have to make that tough decision. Often through Eastern ACE, unaccepted conference proposals are selected for professional development webinars during the year. So if your presentation is not accepted for that year's conference, because it might be for the next year, know that that doesn't mean you can't be engaged or you can't share your message, because with the webinar committee, with the professional development committee, we can recommend you and your presentation for that. So you can still present, not during the conference, but throughout the year. So definitely keep that in mind as you are submitting. So I will I'll start off with some of my own experiences, and then I'll let Joe and Charissa share theirs. And I've had the opportunity to present at Eastern Ace twice now. Once I did it by myself individually, and once I did with a colleague from another university, which was a wonderful experience. And I share that because if you're thinking, I'm a little nervous, I don't know if I want to do it by myself, you don't have to. Think about those folks that are in your network that have a similar belief system, a similar work for a similar institution, and you can share best practices. The second year that I did it with my colleague from another university, we talked about collaborative events and programs at small schools, and how as two small schools, institutions, we were able to put together some pretty incredible collaborative work. The first year that I did it, what was helpful for me was I was looking at what topical areas have not really been covered in the past. And for me, what we tend, and also we see one area that's not covered a lot is assessment. I think that's the one that people often get most intimidated by, or just don't have enough experience with. But that's one that definitely we don't see enough of. So hint, hint. But my first year, I did one on assessment on the overall external review process, and how I took my team through an internal review, an external review, and then how those results impacted the growth of my office. And from that, I then came up with a part 2. Like Joe said, you can do a part 2, which I submitted the following year and wasn't accepted. So what I did was I took that and submitted it to another conference, which it was. So I share that to say, you know, my first presentation was accepted. I presented. I wanted to go for a step 2 to follow through. It wasn't, but then I looked for another outlet in which it was accepted. So you do have so many options, and it just goes back to that point of the confidence. And once you do it, you'll feel it, you know, it goes back to cover letter writing. Once you write one cover letter, it comes a lot easier as you do the other ones. So same thing with conference proposals. Be confident, know that you can do it, and never hesitate to reach out to the committee members. If you have questions along the way, ask them before you submit, because maybe they can give you some answers that will give you that extra step. So that's kind of my own experience of submitting on topics I've done. So Joe or Charissa, anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Kristen. And good advice too, especially on don't hesitate to reach out to us. I think that's an important element that is often overlooked. We're here to help. If there's a question, if there's a concern about something, please feel free to reach out. But I also had the pleasure of presenting at a conference. I presented at the 2016 Eastern Ace Conference in Philadelphia. And forgive me because I don't remember the conference theme title, but mine was on working with veteran student populations, so around career development, and I tied in a little bit too around how employers might potentially help to recruit that population. Much like I mentioned at the beginning, I was very hesitant myself. I was thinking to myself, don't people already know this? And, you know, isn't this kind of obvious? But I said to myself, let's try it out, kind of stepping out of your comfort zone a little bit, if you will. I was able to submit it, got it approved. And I found that during the presentation itself, the simplest things that I thought everybody might have known were actually probably the biggest takeaways. And an example that I can give is one of my slides had featured a list of action verbs that pertain well to descriptions for folks with military experience, right? So here are some important action verbs that you can potentially utilize as you really transition your resume from military to civilian. And I remember there was a member in the audience who took a picture of that, shared on social media, and I think had a bunch of likes from it. And it was one of those things that really kind of just opened my mind. And I said to myself, I'm so glad I did this. I'm so glad I stepped out of my comfort zone, because really, I think I had important information that I was able to share. And for me, what really inspired me to present was just attending conferences the 2 previous years before that. I had learned so much, had taken so much with me, applied it to my own work, that I said, I think I want to try this, and I want to do this. And to my surprise, it was actually really successful. So if you are having those doubts, if you're saying to yourself, yeah, people probably already know this, consider submitting anyways. I would highly recommend that. And I'll just say too, from the perspective of serving on the committee, one of the hardest things for us to do is to deny a proposal, because really we're not getting any proposals that are not worthy of presentation. And so that's one of the biggest challenges. And so, like we had mentioned before, if you didn't get accepted for it, that's okay. Try the webinar. And I remember that we've had webinar folks who actually presented the same topic at a conference as well. So, there's always that option too. So keep that stuff in mind. And again, don't hesitate to reach out with any questions if you are kind of in that, do I do this or not? So, and Sharissa, I'll turn over to you for any other.
Oh my God, Joe. Thank you. I felt like we were almost in a war room when we were looking at those conferences. We were like, no, this one, it was really hard to make. There were a couple of times where we're like, we don't even know. Like, we'll put this to a side and come back to it. So it is, to the audience, it is kind of like we are kind of narrowing down, and it's really hard. So I will say I've never actually can't say never, because this is actually my first kind of presentation. So I'm a little excited. So, but in terms of, and that was something that I remember just sitting in one of the meetings with Kristen and Joe and just saying, oh, I never presented, because I'm like, I don't know what to submit. And, everyone's like, why not? You should submit. It's about your creativity. And I cannot echo that enough in terms of what Joe and Kristen are saying, of just, if you have an idea, just go for it. Because you really don't know. And when we're sitting in those rooms and we're really looking at those, I'm like, oh, wow, like, I didn't think about this. Oh, you could do it on this. Like, and it's just, we think so narrow-minded sometimes when it comes to our work and what we can do. But really, like, if you have an idea, like, really go for it and see what happens. And if you want to kind of see like what was done in the past, you can log on to into your Eastern ACE account and visit the past conference proposals. And when you go there, you can actually see what has been submitted, as well as what proposals have been accepted by SHRM, or SHRM approved rather. So I would encourage everyone, especially the employers, please submit your conference submissions. Let us see what you have and share your knowledge with Eastern ACE members.
At this time, we wanted to share with you our contact information. So please, please, please feel free to follow up with myself, with Joe, Sharissa, with any questions on this. Even moving forward, as you decide to submit or want to submit, you want us to look over anything or have questions, don't hesitate. We are happy as your Eastern ACE family to continue to assist you. But I think what we want to do right now is turn it over to you folks as our viewers with questions that you specifically have coming into this, or that may have arisen after hearing us present.
Very good. Thank you so much, Kristen, Sharissa, and Joe, for your presentation and your expertise. This was a joy listening to, even just as a moderator for you all. So just as Kristen had indicated, we're just going to shift on over to the question and answer portion of our time here today, and encourage you all, continue to use the chat box. I was seeing some chats come on in. Thank you so much for engaging with us. We're so excited to have you join us here for the webinar today. So some questions I have here for you. First one, it looks like it's going to be more geared towards Eastern ACE. So the question is, if I presented my proposal at another conference, will I be able to submit that proposal, the same proposal, to Eastern ACE?
Absolutely. I mean, we don't know where you presented it, so we're not keeping track of where, if it's something that is still relevant, it addresses the topics of consideration, then go for it. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd add on to that too. I think part of the question that comes in the proposal form is, have you presented at a conference previously. And so seeing that information actually is helpful to us as reviewers to know that, yeah, I mean, if this was something that was important somewhere else, and there could be some relevancy to our membership, absolutely, it may help you even more.
Very good. Thank you so much, Joe and Kristen, for sharing with that. Another question that just came in. Are there different guidelines for the 20-minute proposals versus the 60-minute proposals for Eastern ACE? Assumedly, I believe.
We use the same exact guidelines. So the NACE guidelines that we use, the scoring that we do for the 60-minute is the same that we do for the 20-minute. There have been times as well, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe and Teresa, where people have submitted a 60-minute and we've asked them, we can't give you a 60-minute spot, but we would love for you to do a 20-minute if you're still interested in presenting. And sometimes that's worked out really well too. So we use the same methodology, the same ranking and scoring system for both.
Yes, we have asked if they could do it in a 20-minute session. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I was responding to our friend who asked that question. Okay, another question that we have is if I submit a proposal, and I think you answered this in your presentation, but I want to ask it again just for our friends if they missed it. If I submit a proposal and it was not accepted, will I be notified with feedback on the reason why my presentation was accepted, or should I reach out to Eastern ACE about that myself?
Yeah, so you will receive information that your proposal has not been accepted, but in that email, there is no information about why it wasn't. It's simply additional information around number of submissions we may have received, alternative options such as a webinar that you might be able to take advantage of. So if somebody does have a specific question, feel free to reach out to the co-chairs of the committee to provide that additional detail.
Very good. Thank you, Joe. And as you mentioned in your presentation, you had indicated that there can be co-presenters, which is really great with these presentations. So one question that came in is how many co-presenters are allowed to present in a breakout session?
I don't believe there's a limit, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I want to say, you probably want to keep it to max, 4 or 5, maybe if it's a panel, because if we're talking about more than that, then it gets really confusing in terms of space and who's kind of leading this, and just a thought. So I don't think there's an actual limit that we would provide, but the suggestion would be to probably cap it around 4 or 5. And feel free to add that to that, guys.
Yeah, I was getting ready to add, I went to one session where there were four co-presenters, and that wasn't a panel. So outside of a panel, it was 4 co-presenters, and they each had a different role, and it worked. So it wasn't like it was 4 people and they were crowding on top of each other or anything like that. They each had a role in a piece, and it went very smoothly. So yeah, I would say up to no, we don't, like you said, there's no limit, but no more than 4, I would say.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. And I would also add to that, don't be afraid to, if you're working at a college or university, or you're an employer, you have interns, don't be hesitant to invite one of your students to be a part of a panel or a conversation as well. We had that actually this past year at the virtual conference. There was a presentation where 2 students that took the initiative on a project were able to present. So they're also a part of our population that we can incorporate as well.
And actually, it reminds me of something else. I remember at one of the conferences, as an attendee, somebody actually had a student it wasn't Zoom, it was another type of platform, but if I have all these people that I want to speak, can you actually bring them in through a computer or a camera or something like that? It might be another option. So something else to consider.
I love that. I love that encouragement of student incorporation in these presentations. It's great to hear the diverse perspectives of not only the career development professionals, the employers, but also the students that we get to work with, which is just such a pleasure. Another question that just came through, guys, you're getting good questions coming in. Question that we just received I'm thinking about how to read this out loud. So would you mind sharing, or if you're able to, do you know the average amount of proposals that you receive per conference per year?
What is it about?
So I want to say 2 years ago, it was probably about 80 to 85.
Mhm.
Does that sound right, Kristen? Yeah.
Yes, and I've seen it as up as too high as 120. So I would say somewhere in the 80 to 100, 120 range at any given point.
'Cause I remember going through 60 proposals.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
That's
I
narrowed down
see.
to 60.
I see Phil's comment about, wow, that's a lot. It is, and that's why we have such a large team, and we go through that implicit bias training, and we break our team up into subcommittees to review. And then once the subcommittees review, we all come back as a larger committee to go over the average rankings and look at not only the rankings, but the audiences, is it college, employer, or both, and the topics. So there's a lot of methodology and strategy that goes behind the process.
And I would also just like to encourage, I know we just hopefully, I'm hoping we're coming out of a pandemic, don't know what's going on. We do plan on being in person for next year, but even if you are not too sure what next year is going to bring, please still submit your proposal. Please just go ahead and submit. Just share your ideas with us. We want to, this is what the Eastern ACE is all about, is about sharing those great ideas. So please make sure you're sharing those ideas.
Awesome. Thank you so much for giving all the input, guys. More questions coming in. These are great. I feel like once people start asking questions, it sparks ideas, and I love hearing that.
Absolutely.
So this is a good question that wasn't touched on in the presentation. So if students or alumni are part of a panel presentation or part of the proposal process and they get accepted for a presentation, do they need to pay to attend the conference? Do we know that?
I can speak to the past 2 years with the virtual, that if they were just coming on as a presenter, then no, they did not. But I'm not sure about in person, because that's going to involve, we can find that answer out.
Yeah.
We can definitely find that answer out.
If anything, email me. Let me just drop my email in the chat and I can email me your question directly.
Okay, great.
And I will find that answer for you. My email's in the chat.
Great. I'm gonna put that in the question here. Or please email for more information. Awesome. More questions come in. Ooh, that's an interesting question. We just got a question. Does your mindset change when reviewing a presentation proposal that is for an in-person presentation or a virtual presentation? Does that
Not at all.
impact your decision-making process or reviewing process?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
I think if anything in the past, I remember last year, Joe and I had a situation or two where we had to ask someone if they wouldn't mind just changing the format. You know, would they, rather than doing it a panel, would they do it as a discussion? Because we wanted their topic, but the format just wouldn't really fit the virtual platform. So I think that's the only way that we shifted or encouraged someone to shift. But in terms of our eyes looking at it, I don't think that changed whatsoever.
Yeah,
No.
no, it's the same.
Yeah.
The only tough part for us is the fact that when virtual, it was just less proposals could be accepted. So,
Right.
yeah.
Or people who said they didn't want to, you know, it had to be in person. And then like, I was like,
Right.
really? You don't want to really, like, why
Right.
can't, like me really twisting their arms to do it? And they're like, no, it has to be in person. It's actually, that really goes back to the presenter, but nope,
Right.
it's pretty much virtual or in person, same set of eyes.
Yep.
Very good. And then another question, and I don't know the answer to this, so I'm looking forward, maybe you do, maybe you guys don't, we can get that for you, is do you know when the call for would you happen to know when the call for proposals are for the conference for 2022?
I do not have that information as of now, but it would probably be around the same date. So more to come on that.
Okay, so around the same date, that was September last year, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
correct.
typically like the end of September.
September.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
So stay tuned. Check your spam, check Easternase. We'll make sure, trust me, I'm gonna make sure you know.
Stay
Teresa,
tuned
that's a good point too. So if you do submit something, make sure you do keep an eye on that spam and junk folder, because
Yeah.
sometimes emails can get lost. I know we ran into that a couple of times with some proposals. So make sure that you do keep an eye on that stuff, because you know, communications could come out from a different address and perhaps it lands in there, you know, unfortunately. So just, yeah, keep an eye out on that stuff too throughout the process.
So in other words, you're encouraging us to make sure we keep our inboxes organized.
That's right.
Yes. Well, very, very good, my friends. Very good. I have 2 more questions I'm seeing here. Can I submit more than one proposal?
That happens. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And last one, can I submit a proposal and a speed session topic?
Yep.
Yes.
You sure can.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Well, very good. I'm just checking everything here to see if I have any more questions that have come in. And I invite anybody to share any more questions, whether you prefer the chat box or the Q&A session here. So I'll give you a little bit more time for that, but I'll start the process of the wrap up for y'all. Again, thank you so much, Kristen and Teresa and Joe. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. This is all the time that we have for today, unless, of course, there's some questions coming in. But we are so happy that you all have tuned in for this webinar. Please save the date. Speaking of the Eastern ACE 2022 annual conference is June 22nd and 24th at Atlantic City, New Jersey at the Borgata Hotel, Casino and Spa. Stay tuned for the conference proposal submissions opening up in the next couple months. And please be sure to tune in to our next webinar, which will be starting back up in the next few weeks. Thank you all and have a wonderful, wonderful. Oh, I have one more Q&A in here. We got one more Q&A. We got time. We got time. We got one more question here, y'all. So what makes a strong proposal?
That's a good question. For me, I don't know if I'm giving too much away. For me, it is thinking out something that thinks outside the box, something that's never been done, something that's new on the horizon, something that you might have heard of on the webcast, or excuse me, on a podcast, something you read about, you kind of implemented it, and now you want to share it with the community. For me, I'm always looking for something new, something innovative. As well as especially if it's an employer, because we always try to make sure that employers are submitting. So if you are an employer and you have a program in your office that can be duplicated on the higher ed side, that is something that I'm like, oh my God, I want to learn more about this. So that's what I kind of look at. Kristen, Joe? I
mean, I'd echo that, what you just said, Teresa, for sure. For me, I think it's clear, strong learning objectives, giving the reviewers a clear picture of what this is. If it's too vague, if it's too general, if we have questions about what are they getting at here, that to me suggests that this may not be the strongest proposal. So, making sure that everything is clear, it's laid out appropriately, in the committee has a clear understanding of how this could really impact everybody who may be involved with it, whether it's reviewing or, of course, the audience.
And I add on to it. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
No, I was just going to say, I echo what the both of you are saying. And what's also important for me is the application piece of it. Is this something that can be applied? Is this something that I can walk away from and know that it's not going to cost me a lot of money? It's going to cost extra, extra resources, that it's something that I can do, that it's manageable. And that's not always the case because we know we have different sizes of schools, and we definitely, that's why one of our categories, we have a small and community college topical area, but I really do like to look for the application piece as well.
I just want to add to Joe's for the learning objectives. I think we asked, you have to submit at least 3, but we take up to 5. The learning objectives that you submit, we cannot be clear on that. Like make sure it's very well written and it really, we can look at it and like kind of vision what it's going to be, because that makes a really easy determination if it's something that should be accepted, gets a scoring, as well as reviewing it for sure. I cannot stress on the learning objectives. Like that is kind of like the make it and break it part of your proposal.
Sorry, y'all. I am making sure I respond to our friend who asked that question. Very good. Very good. Well, this is the end of our time here today. Thank you all so very much for all of your questions. We cannot thank you enough. And again, Kristen, Teresa, and Joe, you've been wonderful. Thank you for sharing your expertise, your heart, and your enthusiasm for conference proposal writing. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you guys.
Bye.